Marcus Webb had been a cargo ship captain for 7 years. He knew the rules of space travel. He knew how to keep his crew safe, how to navigate through dangerous sectors, and how to keep his mouth shut when he saw things he should not see. But 7 years of following rules had made him restless. The spaceport on Kepler Station was crowded and loud. Thousands of beings from hundreds of different worlds moved through the corridors every single day. Traders shouted their prices. Security patrols walked past in their armor. Ships docked and undocked with mechanical precision. Marcus stood in the middle of the lower market district, watching the chaos. When everything changed, he had only come down to get fresh supplies. His ship, the cargo vessel called the Nova Star, sat in Dock Bay 7 with its cargo hatches open. The crew was on leave. Marcus had nothing to do for 3 days except walk around and think about his life. He did not expect to find a reason to change it forever. The creature moved through the crowd with confidence. Its skin was dark purple, almost black, with markings that looked like scars or patterns nobody could quite understand. It had 6 legs, each one ending in sharp claws that clicked against the metal floor. This was a Vex trader, a species that had been moving through human territories for the last 10 years. Most humans did not like the Vex. They were rough. They cheated. They sold things that should never be sold. But they made money, and that was all that mattered in trade. The Vex was carrying something small and blue. It was struggling. It was screaming. Marcus stopped walking. His eyes focused on the bundle in the creature's lower set of hands. It was a young Zithron, maybe 5 or 6 years old by the way it moved. The cub's body was made of something like crystal, and it bent and twisted as it fought to escape. The light from the spaceport's ceiling caught its form and threw colors across the corridor. The young creature screamed in a way that sounded like breaking glass, mixed with an animal's cry of terror that most beings on the station would have kept walking. The Galactic Council had rules about this. You did not get involved in other species' business. You did not interfere with trade. You did not cause problems. There were treaties and agreements, and breaking them meant exile from every civilized station in the galaxy. Marcus knew all of this. Every human child learned the laws of space travel before they learned how to drive a car. But Marcus had also grown up listening to his grandmother tell stories. She had been old when he was born, ancient by the time he could remember her voice. She sat in a chair by a window in New Mexico and told him about his family's history. She told him about a time when people still believed that standing up for others mattered. She told him about sacrifice and honor. She told him that there were things in the world that were worth more than comfort, worth more than safety, worth more than following the rules. His mother had also taught him something. She was a doctor, and she had a simple rule that she lived by every single day. The young were sacred. If you saw a child in danger, you stopped everything else. You dropped your work. You dropped your plans. You moved. That was not a choice. That was who you were. Marcus had spent 7 years in space trying to forget those lessons. Space was easier when you did not care about anything. Space was simpler when you just did your job and collected your pay. But his grandmother and his mother had taught him too well. He moved. The Vex did not see him coming. The creature had spent the last few years moving through stations where nobody was brave enough or stupid enough to stand in his way. The Vex sold young creatures to people who wanted them for bad reasons. Sometimes they disappeared into illegal markets. Sometimes they were bought by beings who hurt them. The Vex did not ask questions. The Vex just took credits and walked away. Marcus Webb moved like something from Earth's ancient past. His ancestors had lived on a world that wanted to kill them every single day. That world had predators. That world had danger. That world had shaped human muscles and human reflexes for millions of years to do one simple thing: survive threats by moving fast and moving hard. The Vex had no idea what he was dealing with. Marcus drove his whole body into the traitor like a bullet. They crashed into a support column that held up the ceiling structure. The impact shook through the floor. The Vex's lower hands opened from the shock, and the young Zithran fell free. The cub hit the ground and scrambled backward, its crystalline form making high-pitched sounds of fear as it ran toward the safety of the crowd. The Vex recovered faster than Marcus had expected. Its claws came up and raked across Marcus's shoulder. The pain was immediate and sharp. The creature's claws were designed to cut through thick skin and muscle. Marcus had seen Vex weapons before, but never felt them. The sensation was like someone had drawn hot knives across his shoulder and then done it again. Marcus did not stop. He did not think about pain. He brought his elbow up and drove it directly into the Vex's face. The creature's sensory organs were on its head, packed close together like they were trying to fit everything into a small space. The Vex's vision depended on those organs working perfectly. The elbow found its target. The Vex screamed. This was a different sound from the cub's screams. This was pain, mixed with rage, mixed with the realization that something had gone very wrong. The creature tried to pull away, but Marcus had one hand locked on its arm. The two of them wrestled in the middle of the marketplace, while traders and travelers backed away, giving them space. The claws came again, and this time they found Marcus's neck. He felt the rake of sharp points against his skin. He felt the blood start to flow. He felt his left arm go partially numb as the nerves connected to that side of his body stopped working right. The damage was bad. He could feel it in the way his arm hung loose, in the way the pain radiated down to his fingers. But he had accomplished what he needed to do. The Vex was hurt. The cub was safe. The traders around them were calling security. The creature understood that it was going to be captured. The Vex let go and ran, moving faster than anything that Sci should be able to move. It disappeared into the crowd, heading toward the docking areas where ships waited to escape. Marcus fell to his knees. His vision started to blur. He could feel the blood running down his chest from the wound in his neck. He could feel the way his shoulder was not working right. He could feel all the pain finally catching up to him now that the fighting was done. A female voice cut through the noise around him. A Taraxian security officer was moving toward him, speaking quickly into her communication device. She told Marcus to lie down. She told him that medical assistance was on the way. She told him that he had done something very stupid. Marcus looked back at where the cub had been standing. The young Zithran was gone, safely carried away by someone in the crowd. The creature was alive. The creature was safe. Marcus had made that happen. He thought about his grandmother and her stories about standing up. He thought about his mother and her rule about protecting the young. He looked at the Taraxian officer and tried to smile, even though his neck felt like it was on fire. Was the cub okay? He asked. The officer did not answer. She just kept Marcus awake and told him that help was coming. And then everything went dark. The medical bay on Kepler Station had been built to handle any species that might need treatment. There were machines and tools designed by 100 different cultures. Some of them used energy to heal wounds. Some of them used chemicals. Some worked in ways that humans did not fully understand. The walls were white and clean and cold. Everything smelled like something between metal and medicine. Marcus woke up in one of the beds. His chest was wrapped in a medical gel that felt cool against his skin. His shoulder was held in place by some kind of support device that looked like it belonged on a spaceship instead of a human body. His neck felt stiff. When he tried to move, pain shot down his left arm. A human woman walked into the room. She had dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her name tag said Dr. Lena Hayes, and she was holding a tablet that showed information about Marcus's condition. She looked at him with the expression of someone who had seen 1,000 injuries and was not impressed by anything anymore. "You are going to live," she said. That was how she started the conversation. Not with hello, not with welcome to the medical bay. Just the facts. The damage to your shoulder is significant. 3 of your muscles were cut partially through. The claws went deep. But humans have remarkable recovery capacity. Your body is already beginning to heal faster than most species could dream of. The neck laceration missed your carotid artery by approximately 2 centimeters. That artery supplies blood to your brain. If the creature had cut through it, you would be dead right now. Marcus tried to sit up. The pain made him think better of it. He lay back down and looked at the ceiling, which was smooth and white, and told him nothing about what was happening in the station outside. "How long was I unconscious?" he asked. 4 hours. "You lost a lot of blood, but our equipment replaced it quickly enough. You are stable now. The real question is what you were thinking." Lena set the tablet down on a table next to his bed. "A Vex trader. You attacked a Vex trader. Do you understand what that means?" "The cub," Marcus said. "The young Zithran. Is it safe?" Lena stopped moving. She stood there for a moment, looking at Marcus like he was something strange, something she did not quite know how to classify. Then she exchanged a look with the Taraxian doctor who was working at another station in the bay. The Taraxian's form was tall and angular, all smooth lines and efficiency of movement. "You attacked a member of the Galactic Council to save a child you did not know," Lena said slowly, "from a species you have never met. And your first concern is its safety. Not your own, not the legal situation, not the fact that you have created a situation that your government is going to have to deal with. You want to know if the cub is safe." "Yes," Marcus said. "Is it?" Lena looked at the Taraxian. The Taraxian made a sound that might have been approval or might have been confusion. Nobody could ever tell with the Taraxians. "It is safe," Lena said. "It was picked up by other Zithrans in the marketplace. By now, it is likely with its mother. The Vex trader got away before security could intercept him. He's off the station. He's somebody else's problem now. But you are still here, and that is where the real situation begins." 2 hours later, the medical bay became busy. A Zithran female arrived, moving with purpose and fear mixed together. Her body was made of crystal that seemed to glow from inside. Her form was larger than the cub's had been, more defined, shaped by years of existence. Her name was being translated by a small device that hung around her neck, and it came out as crystal when the system tried to work with human sound patterns. She saw Marcus in the bed, and her entire body began to change. The crystal structures inside her form shifted. A sound came out of her, something between wind chimes and alarm, between mourning and celebration. She moved to Marcus's bedside, and she did something that the Zithrans must have done on their own world. Something ancient and meaningful. She touched her forehead to his chest, right over his heart. "You gave me my child," she said through the translator. Her voice was like nothing Marcus had ever heard before. It had layers to it, multiple frequencies. "The Galactic Council has forbidden us from interfering in human trade disputes. We are bound by treaty. All species are bound by treaty. We cannot break these agreements, or we lose everything. Our place in the galaxy, our ability to trade, our right to exist in civilized space." Marcus tried to answer, but Lena put a hand on his shoulder, telling him to stay still. Crystal continued speaking. "But you are not bound by these treaties. Your species joined the Council only recently. Your agreements are still new. Your people have not yet understood the weight of these chains. You are still free. Free to act. Free to do what is right instead of what is permitted. And you use that freedom to save my child." She removed her forehead from his chest and looked at him with optical organs that seemed to contain entire galaxies inside them. "Thank you," she said. "In your language, that word is too small, but I will use it anyway. Thank you." After Crystal left, the Taraxian doctor approached Marcus's bed. The Taraxian was called Structural Resolution, and it was the head of the station's medical operations. "You have created a complex situation," the Taraxian said. Its voice had no emotion in it, just facts. "The Vex Trader is a member in good standing of the Galactic Council. Your attack on him may be seen as an act of aggression against the Council itself. There are protocols that must be followed. There are consequences that may follow. Your government will need to be informed." Marcus looked at the ceiling again. He understood what was being told to him. He had broken the rules. He had caused an incident. He had made himself and his entire species a problem for the Council to deal with. But that young Zithran was alive. That young Zithran was safe. That young Zithran would go back to its mother and grow up and become whatever it was meant to become. That seemed important to Marcus Dodd. It seemed like it might be worth whatever was coming next. Over the next 3 days, Marcus learned what it meant to be a problem. Officials from the Galactic Council came to see him. They asked questions. They took statements. They looked at his wounds like they were evidence against him, instead of proof of what he had been fighting against. They explained the treaties. They explained the rules. They explained why what he had done was not just illegal, but dangerous to the entire future of human civilization. On the 4th day, a message came from Earth. The Council of Nations had been informed. The diplomatic teams were preparing responses. Humanity was being represented at the Council by people who worked in buildings Marcus had never seen, for reasons Marcus did not fully understand. On the 5th day, Marcus was cleared to leave the medical bay. His wounds had stopped bleeding. His arm was still numb, but the doctors said the feeling would come back. His neck was covered with bandages. He looked like a man who had fought something much larger than himself. He was a man who had fought something much larger than himself. And he had won, or he had lost. He was not sure yet which one it was. All he knew was that somewhere on this station, a young Zithran was alive. And that was the only thing that seemed to matter. The news spread through the station like a virus. By the time Marcus was walking down the corridor toward the station commander's office, everyone knew who he was. Traders pointed at him. Security officers watched him. Tourists from a dozen different worlds stopped and stared. Human saves alien cub. Human attacks apex predator. Human apparently has no concept of personal survival. The news networks had picked up the story and made it bigger than it needed to be. They showed video of the marketplace. They showed where Marcus had fought the Vex. They interviewed witnesses who said different things. Some said Marcus was brave. Some said he was crazy. Some said he was dangerous to everyone around him. The station's communication systems filled with messages from lawyers and government officials. Humanity had no established legal presence on Kepler Station. Earth's government had to work through intermediaries and formal requests. The Galactic Council had its own way of doing things, and it moved slowly, like something ancient and massive that could not be rushed out on the 7th day after the incident in the marketplace. Everything changed again. A ship arrived at Kepler Station. It was not a cargo vessel or a passenger ship. It was a council vessel, and it carried an official representative of the Galactic Code. The being was called Designate 7, and it resembled nothing that Marcus had ever seen. It looked like a floating mass of organized crystalline structures, constantly shifting and rearranging themselves. Light moved through its form in patterns that seemed to contain information. When it spoke, it did not use words. It used frequencies that the translation devices converted into human language. Designate 7 brought a formal charge. Marcus Webb was being charged with assault on a member of the Galactic Council. The evidence was clear. The witnesses were numerous. The victim had filed a complaint requesting compensation and justice. Designate 7 was there to ensure that proper protocols were followed. Marcus was escorted to a holding area by security, not a jail cell. The station was not designed to imprison beings, but it was a room with doors that did not open unless security said they could. The walls were solid and white. There was a bed, a table, and a communication screen. From that room, Marcus could see his future collapsing. If he was found guilty, he would be exiled from every civilized station in the galaxy. He would lose his position as a captain. He would lose his ability to work in the space trade. He would lose his ability to even travel through council space. He would be sent back to Earth, and Earth would mark him as someone who had broken interstellar law. There was no defending himself. The facts were not in dispute. He had attacked the Vex Trader. The traitor was a council member. That was all the law cared about. But Lena Hayes had other ideas. The doctor appeared at Marcus's hearing with medical equipment and evidence. She brought images of his wounds. She brought recordings of the fight. She brought data that was impossible to argue with. The injuries sustained by the human are consistent with a violent struggle, she stated to the council. Her voice was calm and professional. The pattern of lacerations on his shoulder shows deep cuts made by claws. The wound on his neck was caused by a raking motion. These are not accidental injuries. These are not self-inflicted injuries. These are wounds caused by a creature defending itself with deadly force. Designate 7 listened. Its crystalline form shifted slightly as it processed the information. The human initiated the assault, the representative said. The Vex Trader was attempting to move through a public space. The human attacked him without justification. There was justification, Lena said. She brought forward information from her tablet. A young Zithran was being carried by the Vex Trader. The cub was demonstrating clear signs of distress. The human intervened to protect a vulnerable being. That is the definition of justified action in virtually every legal system across the galaxy. Now Designate 7's form changed more noticeably. Light moved through it in different patterns. Faster patterns. Patterns that suggested confusion or reconsideration. There is no law that permits intervention in such cases, the representative said. The treaties specifically forbid interference in trade disputes between council members. The Zithran cub is not part of the trade dispute, Lena said. The cub is a sentient being who is being transported against its will. That is not trade. That is trafficking. Lena brought forward more evidence. She brought records from the Zithran Collective. She brought testimony from Crystal, the cub's mother. She brought evidence that the Vex Trader had been moving through the station with multiple young beings in his possession, all showing signs of distress, all being transported toward locations that had no legitimate purpose. The Vex Trader had been engaged in trafficking. Trafficking was a crime that existed above treaties. Trafficking was so illegal in the Galactic Code that even council members could be prosecuted for it. The penalty was permanent exile. The penalty was the removal of all rights and resources. The penalty was complete erasure from civilization. Designate -7 changed completely. Its form seemed to collapse inward, then expand outward again. Light moved through it in patterns that suggested profound reconsideration. The human's actions may be reclassified, the representative finally stated. If the Vex Trader was engaged in trafficking, then the human's intervention was technically lawful under Section 12 the Galactic Code. The human was protecting a vulnerable being from criminal activity. The station commander, a Taraxian named Structural Resolution, appeared in the hearing. This was the being who had treated Marcus's wounds. This was the being who understood the laws of the station better than anyone else. "I make the ruling," the Taraxian said. "Marcus Webb is not guilty of assault. The Vex trader known as Scar Through Darkness is charged with trafficking in sentient beings. The evidence is clear. The crimes are established. I am placing a universal alert for the arrest of this being." The hearing ended. The charges were dropped. But Marcus understood that something larger had happened. He'd been defended because the law was complex. He had been protected because the rules contained within themselves the seeds of their own revision. But the Vex were still out there. The Vex had heard the charges. The Vex had understood the threat. The day after the hearing, security reported that the Vex trader had escaped the station. He had taken a ship and jumped to hyperspace. He was heading somewhere beyond the reach of the Galactic Council. Marcus left the holding area a free being. He walked through the station corridors, and the looks were different now. Some beings looked at him with approval. Some looked at him with fear. Some looked at him with something that might have been respect. Crystal appeared one last time before Marcus left the station. She carried her cub with her. The young Zithran was safe. The young Zithran would live a normal life. The young Zithran would grow up and become whatever it was meant to become. "You changed something," Crystal told Marcus. "Something in the way the galaxy thinks about itself. You showed us that there are still beings willing to stand up. We thought we had forgotten how to do that. We thought we had become too comfortable with rules and treaties. You reminded us that rules and treaties are just words. They are less important than doing what is right." Marcus looked at the young Zithran. The cub's form was bright and clear. There was no fear in it anymore. There was only the simple joy of being alive and safe and with its mother. That seemed like enough. That seemed like it was worth whatever was going to come next. That seemed like it was worth any price he would have to pay. The Nova Star lifted off from Kepler Station exactly 3 weeks after Marcus had fought the Vex trader in the marketplace. His crew was relieved to see him. His shoulder was healing. The numbness in his arm had mostly faded. He could work a full shift now without pain becoming overwhelming. His neck bore a scar that would never fully disappear, but humans heal better than most species. The scar would fade. It would become just another mark on a body that had survived damage. Marcus expected to return to normal cargo runs. He expected to take his ship through space and deliver goods to various stations and colonies. He expected his life to return to the simple, uncomplicated existence it had been before he had seen a young Zithran being carried away by a creature with claws. He was wrong. On the second day of travel away from Kepler Station, a ship matched the Nova Star's velocity and began transmitting signals. Marcus did not recognize the vessel. It had markings that combined symbols from 3 different species. The transmission came through in human language, but translated so perfectly that it sounded strange. No real human had constructed that message. It had been generated by a machine that understood the patterns of human speech, but not the feeling behind it. Captain Marcus Webb of Earth. This is the Zithran Collective Diplomatic Vessel. Harmony through resonance. We request a meeting. Marcus agreed without thinking. A mistake, perhaps, but not a fatal one. The Zithran ship approached slowly. It was beautiful. It was built with curves and angles that seemed to flow naturally from some fundamental understanding of how things should be shaped. The vessel docked with the Nova Star, and a delegation came aboard. Crystal was not with them, but her presence was felt in the way the Zithrans moved. They carried authority, but also respect. They spoke with voices that had layers and frequencies. They brought with them a formal offer from the Zithran. Collective, trade, alliance, cooperation. Your species has demonstrated something that has been rare in the galaxy for thousands of years. the lead Zithran said. Her name was Being of Clarity, and she was older than Crystal, her form more complex and more defined. You have demonstrated the willingness to sacrifice your own safety for those you have no obligation to protect. This is not a small thing. This is a fundamental trait that shapes a species and defines its character. Marcus listened, and he did not interrupt. The Vex have been trafficking in young beings for 50 years. Being of Clarity continued. The Galactic Council has known about this for 40 years. The laws against trafficking exist in the code, but they were not enforced. Species had accepted that this was a problem that was just part of civilization. It was sad, but it was normal. It was wrong, but nothing could be done about it. And then a human, a species that only joined the Council 5 years ago, a species that should have understood the rules and obeyed them, chose instead to act on conscience. She paused. Light moved through her crystalline form in patterns that suggested something like emotion. Your action will change things, she said. The Galactic Council will have to act. Other species will have to make choices they thought they had avoided. Trafficking will become something that is actively prosecuted. We do not know exactly how the future will unfold, but we know that your single action, your moment of choice, has altered the course of history. The Zithran delegation brought a formal treaty with them. Earth was being invited to establish full trading and diplomatic relations with the Zithran collective. This was not a small alliance. The Zithrans had influence across 3 sectors of space. They had colonies on 40 planets. They controlled trade routes that were valuable and productive. Marcus was a cargo ship captain, not a diplomat. He told them that he could not sign treaties. He could not make commitments for his government. He could only give the offer to the people in power on Earth. Being of Clarity understood. She did not seem disappointed. She seemed like she had known this would be the answer all along. We ask only that you take this offer home to your people, she said. Tell them what happened. Tell them why we are offering this alliance. Tell them that humanity has shown us something we had forgotten about ourselves. And tell them that the galaxy is ready to treat humanity as more than just another new species trying to find its place. The Zithran ship disengaged and jumped to hyperspace. The Nova Star continued on its course toward Earth. By the time Marcus arrived in Earth orbit, the news had spread far beyond what he had expected. The incident at Kepler Station had been discussed at the highest levels of government. The Earth Council had met in emergency session. The decision had been made at the top levels of human civilization. Humanity would extend its reach into the galaxy, not as conquerors, not as warriors seeking advantage, not as merchants trying to squeeze profit from every encounter, but as the species that understood honor meant sacrificing your own comfort for others. As the species that understood that standing up for those who could not stand for themselves was more important than following rules that permitted injustice. As the species that could look at a young being in danger and choose action over safety. The diplomatic teams that went to the Galactic Council carried Marcus's story with them. They used it as proof of what humanity was. They used it as foundation for negotiations. They used it as evidence that Earth had values that extended beyond mere economic interest. Over the following 2 years, the effects rippled across the galaxy like waves spreading outward from a stone thrown into still water. The Vex trafficking operation was dismantled not through military action, but through coordination among species. The Zithrans began speaking to the Taraxians. The Taraxians began speaking to other council members. Species that had accepted trafficking as normal began to see it as intolerable. By the time the Galactic Council formally established the Trafficking Enforcement Division, 17 species had committed resources to ending the practice. The Vex trader, who had taken the cub, was caught 11 months after he had fled Kepler Station. He was discovered on a colony world trying to establish a new operation under a false identity. His trial lasted 3 weeks. The sentence was permanent exile. He was exiled to a prison asteroid in the deep black beyond the Council's reach. He would live out his life in isolation, unable to trade, unable to work, unable to exist in any way that mattered to the galaxy. Marcus returned to Earth as a hero. Not because he had done anything extraordinary, but because he had done something simple. He had seen a child in danger. He had acted. He had paid a price for that action. And in paying that price, he had shown the galaxy what humanity was. Designate 7 came to Earth personally to establish the formal alliance. The crystalline representative stood in the chamber of the Earth Council and made a statement that would be recorded in history. Files. Humanity has proven itself worthy of a place at the table of civilized worlds, the representative said. Not because of your technology, not because of your economic power, but because you have demonstrated the capacity for compassion that transcends law, that transcends protocol, that transcends the rules that bind civilizations together. You are a species that understands honor in a way that most have forgotten. We welcome you as partners. We welcome you as friends. We welcome you as the species that reminded us why we had these rules in the first place. Marcus did not attend the formal ceremonies. He was already back in space on his ship, heading toward the next job. He had interviews to give, speeches to make, and places to go. But he knew that something fundamental had changed. Something in the way the galaxy saw itself. Something in the way species interacted with each other. And it had all started because one human captain had seen a young Zithran being carried away by a creature with claws. And he had decided that standing up mattered more than staying safe. Marcus Webb would never eat normally again. This was not a dramatic statement. It was not a metaphor. It was a simple medical fact that his doctors confirmed with data and scans and careful examination. The claws of the Vex trader had cut through muscle and tissue in his neck. The damage had healed. The scar tissue had formed. But swallowing had become a process that required thought and care. Certain foods felt like knives going down his throat. Certain temperatures triggered pain that radiated across his entire neck. Certain textures made him gag. The medical specialists assured him that he would adapt. Humans were good at adapting. Humans had adapted to harsher worlds and worse injuries. His body would learn. It would adjust. It would find new ways to do old things, but normal was never going to be normal again. Marcus sat in a quiet restaurant overlooking the Rio Grande in New Mexico. The river moved in slow patterns far below the building. The desert stretched out in every direction. The sunset was painting the sky in shades of orange and red that looked almost violent in their intensity. He was eating soup with a spoon, moving carefully, letting the liquid slide down his throat without forcing it. It was not a fancy meal. It was not something that required fine dining or expensive preparation. It was just soup. It was just a human eating food in a human restaurant on a human world. But it felt like an achievement. A month before, he had been offered a position as the captain of a new diplomatic vessel. It was a ship designed to move between Earth and the various colonies that humanity was establishing throughout the galaxy. It was a position of honor. It was a position of authority. It was a position that would have made most humans ecstatic. Marcus had declined. He wanted to go back to cargo runs. He wanted to move goods from one station to another. He wanted to work with a crew that did not involve politics or official business or the weight of representing his entire species. He wanted to do simple work. He wanted to live a simple life. But simplicity was never going to come again. His personal communication device buzzed on the table. Marcus looked at the message and felt something shift in his chest. It was a transmission from the Zithran Collective. It came through with his name on it. His name. Not Captain Webb. Not the human who had fought the Vex. His actual name. Marcus Webb. The message was from Crystal, the mother of the cub he had saved in the marketplace. The cub was growing. The young Zithran was older now. 5 years had passed. The cub was now a juvenile, developing the sophisticated consciousness that Zithrans were famous for. The juvenile was curious about the human who had saved its life. The juvenile was curious about the species called Earthwalkers. Would Marcus consider visiting their world? He read the message 3 times. He set his spoon down. He looked at the soup in front of him. The liquid was cooling. The heat was fading. It would not taste as good if he did not eat it soon, but his hands were shaking slightly. 5 years. It had been 5 years since he had fought that Vex trader in the marketplace. 5 years since his life had changed fundamentally. 5 years since he had made a choice that echoed across the galaxy and altered the course of civilization. And now the cub he had saved wanted to meet him. Marcus looked at the soup. He thought about all the things he would never do normally again. He thought about swallowing that hurt sometimes. He thought about his scar and the way it would never fully fade. He thought about the pain that came and went in his shoulder when the weather changed. He thought about all the things he had lost when he had decided to stand up. But he also thought about what he had gained. He thought about Crystal and her gratitude. He thought about being of clarity and the formal alliance. He thought about Designate 7 and the statement made to the entire Earth Council. He thought about the Vex trafficking operation being dismantled. He thought about young beings who would grow up safe now because he had been willing to be hurt. He thought about the Zithran juvenile who wanted to meet him. Marcus picked up his spoon. Again. He took another mouthful of soup. The liquid went down his throat carefully, slowly, with all the care he had learned to give it. It was not normal. It would never be normal. But it was nourishment. It was sustenance. It was the simple act of staying alive. He began composing his reply to Crystal. He would visit their world. He would meet the juvenile who had grown up, knowing that a human had cared enough to bleed for its safety. He would stand on a Zithran planet and look at the sky and understand that his life had meaning that extended far beyond anything he had ever imagined. The reply took him 30 minutes to compose. He wanted to get the words right. He wanted to express that he was honored. He wanted to show that he was grateful for the invitation. He wanted Crystal to understand that meeting her child, grown into something beautiful and complex, was something he had been hoping for without even knowing it. When he sent the message, Marcus felt something settle inside him. Some kind of peace. Some kind of understanding that he had made the right choice, even though the right choice had cost him more than he could have anticipated. He finished his soup. He paid the bill. He walked out of the restaurant and looked at the desert and the sky. The sunset was finishing now, the colors fading into purple and blue, and finally into the darkness of night. Stars were beginning to appear. Some of those stars had planets. Some of those planets had beings living on them. Some of those beings would know his name. Some would know his story. Marcus thought about his grandmother and her stories about standing up when it mattered. He thought about his mother and her rule about protecting the young. He thought about both of them and wondered if they would be proud of the choice he had made. He walked back to his hotel. Tomorrow he would make arrangements for travel to the Zithran world. Tomorrow he would begin the process of preparation. Tomorrow he would start moving toward the next chapter of his life. But tonight, he simply existed. He existed as a human who had been wounded and had healed. He existed as a being who had paid a price for doing what was right. He existed as a captain who had chosen to act when action was forbidden. He existed as the man who had changed the galaxy by saving one child. And tomorrow, he would eat breakfast. It would not be normal. The eggs would slide down his throat carefully. The toast would require time. The coffee would be warm and pleasant, but nothing he took for granted anymore. But he would eat it. He would survive. He would continue, because humans were the species that could stand up. Humans were the species that could choose compassion over rules. Humans were the species that could see something wrong and decide to make it right, no matter what the cost. His scars would remind him of that every single day for the rest of his life. And that was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything.